A priest returns to cleanse what faith once cursed. But in Ravenshade, holiness bleeds and the devil wears a collar. The storm arrived before nightfall. Thick clouds rolled over Ravenshade, turning the sky black long before the sun could set. The wind howled through the forest, and the church bell swayed in the storm, ringing on its own, as if announcing something wicked. Father Daniel lit every candle he could find. Their glow trembled against the damp stone walls as he knelt before the altar, the cursed journal open in front of him. The final page showed a drawing. Father Gregory surrounded by kneeling figures, their faces melted in agony. Above them, written in blood, were the words, "The Mass must never end." Daniel shuddered. The whispers from the confession room still echoed in his mind. They had begged for forgiveness, but forgiveness never came. The wind outside grew stronger. Rain battered the roof. Then, through the thunder, Daniel heard something that froze him. The faint sound of voices singing. It came from the nave. He rose slowly, clutching a candle, and stepped toward the pews. The air grew colder with every step. The candles behind him flickered and died one by one until only his remained. The singing grew louder. An old Latin hymn twisted into something hollow and wrong. When he reached the center aisle, he saw them. Rows of ghostly parishioners, kneeling and praying, their faces pale and blurred like smoke. Their eyes were white and hollow. At the altar stood a figure in a blackened priest's robe, his back turned to Daniel. "Father Gregory," Daniel whispered. The figure turned. The face was burned and rotted, lips stretched into a smile that didn't reach his empty eyes. "Welcome, my successor," the specter said, voice echoing like thunder in a cave. "The Mass continues. You are just in time." "I came to cleanse this place," Daniel said, his voice trembling but firm. "These souls must rest. This house belongs to God." Gregory laughed softly. "God abandoned this house. When he turned away, we found a new master." The ghostly congregation raised their heads in unison, their hollow eyes fixed on Daniel. The hymn turned into screams. Daniel held up his crucifix. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I command you." The crucifix began to burn in his hand. He dropped it with a cry as smoke rose from his palm. The candles blew out, plunging the church into darkness. Then the altar began to bleed. Thick, dark blood dripped from its edges and ran down to the floor, soaking the carpet. The smell of rot filled the air. Gregory raised his hands. "The faithful must feed the altar once more. The offering must be made." The congregation stood and began walking toward Daniel, their bodies swaying, mouths open in silent wails. He backed away, fumbling through his coat until his fingers found the small silver cross blessed by the bishop. He raised it high and began to chant a purification prayer. Voice broke through the chant. "You pray to a God who no longer listens." The church trembled. The windows shattered. Wind howled through the aisles, tearing pages from Bibles and scattering them like ashes. Daniel fell to his knees, clutching the cross, refusing to stop praying. "Forgive them, Lord. Free their souls." Gregory stepped closer, his burned face inches from Daniel's. "There is no forgiveness here, only remembrance." He reached toward Daniel, but as his hand touched the priest's shoulder, a blinding light burst from the cross. The spirit screamed and dissolved into black smoke. Gregory staggered back, shrieking as his face cracked like broken glass. Daniel stood, trembling, holding the cross high. "By the power of heaven, I command this darkness to leave." For a moment, silence. The light flickered, and then the bell began to toll again. Clang. The light vanished. Daniel looked around. The ghosts were gone, but the air felt heavier than before. He turned back to the altar and gasped. The altar had changed. Where the stone once stood was a pulsing black mass, like living flesh. From its surface, whispering voices called his name. He stumbled backward, shaking. The church was alive. The curse was deeper than ghosts. It was growing, feeding on faith itself. As he turned to flee, a deep voice echoed from the tower above. "Run if you must, priest. But when the final bell rings, even heaven will not save you." Lightning flashed through the stained glass, casting red light over the altar. Daniel ran into the storm, the bell still ringing behind him, each toll a promise of damnation. The storm never stopped. For 3 long nights, Ravenshade was drowned in thunder, lightning, and fear. No one slept. The villagers said the church bell rang without pause, each toll heavier than the last, as if it were counting down to something terrible. Father Daniel had not left the chapel. He could not. The curse had rooted itself inside the house of God, and if he fled, the darkness would spread across the whole town. He stood before the altar, soaked and trembling, clutching the silver cross that still burned faintly with holy light. The bleeding altar pulsed like a heart. The cursed journal lay open beside it, its pages fluttering violently, though there was no wind. A voice echoed from the shadows. "You cannot fight what God abandoned." Father Gregory stepped from the darkness, his form more solid now. His blackened robes fluttered without wind, his face charred and hollow, eyes burning like embers. Daniel raised his cross. "This is God's house. You turned it into a pit of despair, but tonight it ends." Gregory smiled. "You still believe he listens? Foolish child. I prayed harder than you ever will. I begged for mercy when the plague took them all, but heaven stayed silent. So I gave them salvation in flame." The church groaned, its walls splitting. Red light seeped from the cracks, and the whispers of the damned filled the air. Daniel stepped forward, chanting louder. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Gregory roared, and the spirits of his lost congregation rose once more. Their eyes glowed white as they surrounded Daniel, crying, "Forgive us! Forgive us!" The candles blew out. Darkness swallowed everything. Then, in the blackness, Daniel heard his own heartbeat, and another, louder, pulsing from the altar. He realized the curse was alive, feeding on the hatred and despair left behind. Destroying Gregory alone would never end it. He needed to cleanse the altar itself. "Lord," he whispered, tears streaming down his face, "if you ever loved this place, hear me now." No answer came, only the echo of the storm. Gregory's laughter shook the floor. "He turned away long ago. You pray to emptiness," Daniel screamed. "Then I will face the darkness alone." He plunged the silver cross into the bleeding altar. A blinding white light burst from it, filling the church with heat and sound. The spirits shrieked as they began to burn, their forms disintegrating into ash. Gregory screamed in rage and pain, his body cracking open with fiery light. "You will burn with me," Gregory bellowed, lunging at Daniel. The two collided, and the world exploded into flame. Daniel fell to the floor, the journal burning beside him. Through the roaring fire, he saw Gregory kneeling before the altar, screaming as light poured from his mouth and eyes. His shadow writhed, trying to escape. "You cannot destroy faith," Daniel whispered. "It destroys itself only when we give up." Gregory's voice broke into a wail. "He turned away from me." Daniel forced himself to his feet, raising the burning cross. "Then look upon me, for I have not turned away from him." He pressed the cross against Gregory's chest. The ghost's body exploded into a burst of light, tearing through the church like the sound of 1,000 bells. The congregation vanished. The altar stopped bleeding, and the bell, finally, fell silent. Daniel collapsed, barely breathing. Smoke filled the chapel, and part of the ceiling gave way, but the flames began to dim. A soft golden glow spread across the cracked crucifix above the altar. The voice that came next was not loud. It was soft, sorrowful, like wind through leaves. "You were never alone." Tears rolled down Daniel's cheeks as peace filled the air. The storm outside faded. The candle flames burned steady. He looked around. The ghosts were gone. Only ashes remained, and a faint warmth lingered in the room. Daniel knelt one last time before the altar. "Forgive him, Lord," he whispered. He only wanted to be heard. He rose, weak but alive, and stepped into the dawn. The church stood silent behind him, scarred but cleansed. The mist had lifted from Ravenshade, and sunlight touched the bell tower for the first time in years. As Daniel walked down the old path toward the village, he looked back once. A single ray of light shone through the broken window, falling upon the altar. The curse was broken, and though the wind whispered faintly through the forest, it carried no hatred, only peace. For the first time since the plague, God had not turned away.